Hello, good evening everyone. This is Honey Pie from Chicago, Illinois, USA. I hope you guys are having a good weekend so far, as well as I am. My car is back up and running again. Long story short, it died last Thursday night due to a bad alternator, and it was horrible. Horrible experience. But now I'm in the comfort of my own home, in my chair, my little Beatles blanket, and this pillow here. It says, so many books, so little time. I found it in the store a long time ago. But anyway, for some of you who are not too familiar with the Beatles, it was a rock and roll band. They were together and playing together in the 1960s. It was sometime in the early 60s through 1970. They were together. So today it has been 62 years since the Beatles came to America. It was their first visit together as a group. For John, Paul, and Ringo, it was their first ever visit. The only Beatle that had been to the U.S. before was George Harrison, because he had a sister who lived in Illinois. He was there for just about a couple months before the Beatles went to U.S. together. And that cat behind me is Jasmine. Say hi, Jasmine. Sorry for the background. My partner and I moved into a new apartment together, and we have so many things left for us to unpack. But anyway, I have a book right here. This is a little golden book, biography for kids about the Beatles, as you can see here. That one here is Paul McCartney. This is John Lennon. This is George Harrison. And that's Ringo Starr. So, this is the Beatles. It's by Judy Kochske. And it's illustrated by Make Plensky. I hope I pronounced it right. So, and please bear with me on the page turning because of my Dragula hands here. Here we go. One more thing. I don't know if tipping is involved, but if so, and I'm not soliciting, I promise, my Venmo is at Airy. That's my first actual name. At Airy Honey Pie. Airy is spelled with capital E, Honey is capital H, and Pie is capital P. And Cash App is $ Honey Pie Beatles. Capital H, capital P, and capital B. And of course, you know Beatles is spelled like this. So here we go. John, Paul, George, and Ringo were four friends from Liverpool who rocked the world as the Beatles. Each year, millions of visitors come to the bustling city in northwest England to learn about the band and see where their musical dream began. As you can see, there are tourists that visited Liverpool, England, and of course I went to Liverpool, and that was such an experience I'll never forget. These people pose into the statues and taking pictures of here. And of course I did pose with the statue, but outside of my drag. Again, bear with me on the turning pages. John Winston Lennon was born in Liverpool on October 9th, 1940. His middle name came from England's Prime Minister at the time, Winston Churchill. When John's parents split up, he went to live with his Aunt Mimi. John spent hours in his room drawing cartoons, writing stories, and playing his guitar. The guitar was a gift from his mother, Julia, who died when he was 17. Of course, that's John Lennon right there. Paul McCartney was born on June 18th, 1942, into a house filled with music. His father was a cotton salesman who played piano and trumpet in his own jazz band. Paul turned down music lessons and instead taught himself how to play the piano and guitar. Like John, Paul lost his mother when he was young. But Paul and John shared something else that would bring the two together: a love of music. That's Paul McCartney right there, learning piano on his own. Personally, I'd rather have someone teach me to play guitar and piano because it's hard, really, to do it on your own. One summer day, Paul dropped by a festival to hear a band called the Quarrymen. Started by John, the Quarrymen played rock and roll and jazzy tunes called skiffle. During the band's break, Paul played a few songs on the guitar. John liked what he heard and asked him to join the band. There's the band right there. And by the way, I forgot the year really, but it was July 6th of when John and Paul first met. The Quarrymen had kids dancing all over Liverpool when they needed a third guitarist. Paul suggested his friend George Harrison, born on February 25th, 1943. George fell in love with rock and roll after hearing Elvis Presley play Heartbreak Hotel. When he got his first guitar, George practiced so much that his fingers were sore. And there's George right there. He was known as the quiet Beatle and calm. So, hard to go into details really about George. But anyway, that's him right there. And he was the youngest in the band. All that practice paid off. At the age of 15, George auditioned for the Quarrymen on the top of a double-decker bus. The band had found their new guitarist. Now all they needed was a new name. One of the hottest groups at the time was the Crickets. John thought it would be cool for their band to have a bug name too. Guitarist Stuart Sutcliffe suggested Beatles or Beatles, Beatles. With their new name came a new goal. The Beatles would become famous. Or as they like to say, they'd go to the toppermost of the poppermost. See, that's 4 out of 5 people thinking of a name for a band. Actually, it was 4. The other member of the band has not mentioned yet. And no, it's not Ringo. You'll see for yourself when I turn the page. The Beatles were still far from famous when they were invited to perform in Hamburg, Germany. John, Paul, George, Stewart, and drummer Pete Best. There you go. There's another member there. That's right before Ringo. Jumped at the chance to bring their tunes overseas. The band played every day of the week, sometimes for as long as 8 hours. See, there they are. After months of rock in Hamburg, the Beatles left Germany with new mop-top haircuts, more fans, and their first recorded single, My Bonnie. They also left without Stewart, who stayed in Hamburg to study art. And sadly, about a few years later, Stewart died very young. I forgot how exactly, but it was really sad. The Beatles were back in Liverpool and back to performing at small clubs. Fans stood wall to wall to hear them play. The band's popularity was growing. All they needed was a recording contract and a little help from a friend named Brian Epstein. There they are. The picture on this page was from a place called the Cavern Club. It's a little venue in Liverpool. I visited there when I was in England, and it's still looking great to this very day. And there's still been some artists coming to Cavern Club to play their music there, and it was quite an experience. As the Beatles' new manager Brian got the right to work. First, he changed the band's look. Instead of leather jackets and jeans, John, Paul, George, and Pete would perform in suits and ties. And the boys were expected to act like polite gentlemen and always be on time for their shows. The band with, and this is the manager, Brian Epstein. And in case any of you do not know, Brian Epstein was gay. No joke, he was. Matter of fact, if you haven't seen the movie Midas Man yet, I'd recommend you watch it, because this is a true story all about Brian Epstein and everything. So, John and Paul got to work too, teaming up to write new songs. Paul wrote his lyrics neatly in a notebook. John scribbled his songs on random scraps of paper. Their writing styles were different, but they led to catchy tunes such as She Loves You and I Want to Hold Her Hand. This is Paul right there on the notebook, and John right there writing down scraps of paper. The Beatles had great new songs, but still no recording contract. Finally, a music producer named George Martin invited John, Paul, George, and Pete to audition at his studio. After hearing them play Love Me Do, he offered the Beatles a contract and a suggestion: find a new drummer. There. Yep, that's where Ringo comes in. Saying goodbye to Pete wasn't easy, but the Beatles would soon say hello to an awesome drummer from Liverpool who called himself Ringo Starr. Born Richard Starkey on July 7th, 1940, Ringo spent many months in the hospital as a young teenager. To pass the time, he started drumming, grabbing whatever he could to bang on his bedside cabinet. See, there's Ringo right there. In fact, that's how he first got interested in the drums back then. When he was a teenager, he was in the hospital for tuberculosis, and there was a little music section where they learned about the instruments such as the drums, trumpet, guitar, and all that stuff. And that's where Ringo caught his eye, and he first fell in love with the drums. And he never wanted to do anything else but playing the drums. Hey, can't blame him for that. I mean, when you liked something and you joined doing that, I mean, God bless, you know? Years later, the drummer had many... let me start over. Years later, the drum with many rings, that's how he got the name Ringo, because he wore a lot of rings. The drummer with many rings on his fingers had the right look and the right beat for the Beatles. See, and there they are with Ringo right there. By 1963, Beatlemania had spread throughout England. Kids combed their Kids combed their Beatles haircuts, carried Beatles lunch boxes to school, and read Beatles magazines. When fans thought they knew the band's favorite candy, they showered the stage with jelly beans while they sing. It was actually called Jelly Babies back then, because that's what they were called in England. Jelly Babies. Along with the fame came a new nickname. John, Paul, George, and Ringo were called the Fab Four because they were so fabulous. See all this right there? There's Lunchbox, there's bobbleheads. Yeah, they're bobbleheads for them. And a little guitar, and move the photo of them imitating the Beatles with the haircuts. Boy, it was crazy back then. Well, of course I wouldn't know because I wasn't even born yet. My mother would know because she was already born before then. And my dad too, of course. He's passed away now, so there's not much to talk about with him. So the Beatles now sang at fancy London theaters and even performed for the royal family. Yep, They performed for Queen Elizabeth II. What an honor. What could be bigger than that? Brian had the idea. The Beatles would go to America. The first stop would be New York City to perform on a popular TV show. Then off to Washington, D.C. for the first Beatles concert in the USA. To Brian's surprise, the Beatles were more worried than excited. Their song, I Want to Hold Your Hand, was a hit in America. But would they be? There are the Beatles performing for the royal family, and there's the Queen right there. On February 7th, 1964, the Beatles arrived at New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport. The Fab Four didn't know what to expect until they were greeted by thousands of fans screaming their names and waving welcome signs. The Beatles had arrived in America, and so had Beatlemania. There they are. Of course, you know what that looks like. That Sunday, 73 million Americans tuned in to meet the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. In Washington, D.C., they played in an arena packed with fans. John, Paul, George, and Ringo had truly reached the toppermost of the poppermost. And it was just the beginning. This is the family watching the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. You should find some clips of the Ed Sullivan Show on YouTube, hopefully. It was really awesome. Here's the last page. For the next 6 years, the Beatles would give the world over 200 hit songs. They would be honored by their queen and star in 5 movies. So yeah, there are 5 Beatle movies. A Hard Day's Night, Help, the TV movie Magical Mystery Tour, the animated film Yellow Submarine, and of course, there's Let It Be. The Beatles would become the best-selling band in music history. But through all their triumphs and fame, John, Paul, George, and Ringo would always be 4 friends from Liverpool who made their dreams come true. That's the end. Hope you enjoyed the book. And if you're wondering what had happened to the Beatles since their breakup and all, well, 2 out of 4 Beatles are still with us right now. The drummer Ringo Starr, who now currently lives in Los Angeles with his wife at age 85. That's right, 85. And Paul McCartney is still here as well. I believe he has, I think he at least one home I know there's one in London, and I think he, correct me if I'm wrong for those who have been following Paul, but I think he also has a home with his wife Nancy in New York sometimes. And anyway, Paul is now 83 years old, and both Paul and Ringo are still doing music today. Yep. Ringo just announced recently he's going to do a tour sometime in the early summer later this year. And Paul just finished his tour just a few days before Thanksgiving last year. As for the other 2, John sadly died of gun violence in front of his old apartment home called the Dakota in New York City on December 8th, 1980. And George Harrison died of cancer at age 58 on November 29th, 2001. And John was 40 years old when he got killed. So, again, I hope you guys enjoyed the story, and that's all I got left here. And if you saw the black and white cat behind me, her name is Star. Right after Ringo Starr, of course, with 2 R's at the end. So, all right. Well, I'm going to let you all go, and I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe, stay warm, and fuck ice. If you have kids there, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to curse that way, but still, screw ice. Good night, y'all.